The first boundary you must establish is emotional, because this is where the narcissistic dynamic truly begins. A narcissistic woman does not connect through mutual vulnerability. She connects through emotional extraction. Your reactions, your explanations, your visible hurt, these become fuel. The moment you discover narcissism, emotional openness stops being intimacy and starts becoming exposure. This is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It is about understanding that access to your inner world must be earned, not assumed. Most people make the mistake of trying to explain themselves better, hoping clarity will create understanding. But narcissism does not misunderstand you. It studies you. Every emotional disclosure becomes data. When you argue passionately, defend your intentions, or reveal how deeply something affected you, you are unconsciously handing over leverage. As Carl Jung warned, the unconscious will always seek expression. And when another person learns how to trigger it, they gain power over you. Setting this boundary means fewer words, less emotional display, and no performances of pain. You stop narrating your inner life. You stop seeking empathy where empathy does not exist. Instead, you respond calmly, briefly, and without emotional charge. This alone destabilizes the narcissistic pattern because it removes the reward. When there is no emotional payoff, manipulation loses its grip. This boundary also protects your psyche. Emotional restraint gives you space to observe rather than react, to think rather than defend. In that space, clarity returns. You begin to feel your strength again, not through confrontation, but through composure. Remember this, the most powerful emotional statement you can make to a narcissist is not anger, tears, or explanation. It is self-possession. When your emotions are no longer available for exploitation, control quietly shifts back to you. The second boundary you must establish is the boundary of time and availability, because time is the silent currency of power in any relationship. A narcissistic woman does not merely want your attention, she wants priority. She creates urgency where none exists. Late-night messages, sudden emotional crises, unexpected demands, each designed to pull you back into her orbit. When you respond immediately, cancel plans, or rearrange your life, you send a message without words. Your time belongs to her. Psychologically, this is not accidental. Control over another person's time produces dependence. It fragments your focus, weakens your routines, and slowly conditions you to be on standby. As Carl Jung observed, what dominates consciousness begins to shape identity. When someone occupies too much of your time, they begin to occupy your sense of self. Setting this boundary does not require confrontation. It requires structure. You respond when it is appropriate, not when you are summoned. You keep commitments you made to yourself and others. You allow messages to wait. You stop explaining why you are unavailable. Time, once reclaimed, restores psychological balance. It reminds your nervous system that you are not in danger for choosing yourself. This shift often triggers resistance. A narcissistic woman may escalate her behavior, accuse you of distance, or manufacture emergencies. This is not evidence you are doing something wrong. It is evidence the boundary is working. Consistency is crucial. The moment you collapse under pressure, the old pattern returns. When your time becomes intentional rather than reactive, something profound happens. Your life expands again. You think more clearly. You feel grounded. And the narcissistic grip weakens, not because you fought, but because you stopped being endlessly available. Remember this. Whoever controls your time controls your direction. Reclaim it, and you reclaim yourself. The third boundary you must establish is control over conversation, because this is where narcissistic manipulation becomes most visible. A narcissistic woman does not communicate to understand. She communicates to dominate. Conversations are used to confuse, exhaust, and destabilize you. They circle endlessly, shift without warning, and somehow always end with you defending yourself. What appears to be dialogue is often psychological entrapment. You begin to notice patterns. Accusations without resolution, sudden topic changes, selective memory, and emotional bait designed to provoke a reaction. The more you engage, the more the ground shifts beneath you. This is not accidental. Confusion weakens clarity, and clarity threatens control. As Carl Jung understood, when the shadow is denied, it seeks expression through projection. In these moments, you are not being heard, you are being used as a screen. Setting this boundary means refusing to participate in circular arguments. You stop correcting distortions. You stop chasing resolution where none is possible. Instead, you become brief, factual, and emotionally neutral. Silence becomes a strategic response, not a retreat. You disengage when the conversation turns manipulative, without explanation or apology. This often feels unnatural at first. You may feel rude, dismissive, or unfinished. But clarity does not require closure from someone who thrives on confusion. Every time you step out of the loop, you reclaim mental energy. Every time you refuse the bait, you restore your sense of reality. Over time, something important happens. The conversations lose their intensity, the traps stop working, and you realize that peace does not come from winning arguments. It comes from no longer entering them. Remember this: you do not need to prove your truth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Your silence, when chosen consciously, becomes the final word. The fourth boundary you must establish is around personal information, because once narcissism is revealed, information stops being shared and starts being stored. A narcissistic woman listens differently. She is not listening to understand you. She is listening to catalog you. Your fears, ambitions, regrets, childhood wounds, and moments of self-doubt are not received with care. They are archived. Later, they reappear at moments of conflict, subtly reshaped into weapons. Many people confuse openness with honesty and restraint with deception. But psychologically, there is a crucial difference between authenticity and exposure. Authenticity is alignment with truth. Exposure is giving access without discernment. As Carl Jung noted, what is unconscious seeks power through repetition. When you repeatedly reveal your inner life to someone who lacks empathy, you reinforce a pattern where your vulnerability serves their dominance. Setting this boundary means sharing less, not because you are hiding, but because you are protecting. You stop volunteering details about your plans. You stop explaining your motivations. You stop revealing emotional wounds in the hope of being understood. Your inner world becomes private territory again. This creates psychological distance, and distance restores perspective. At first, this may feel unnatural. You may feel closed off or guarded, but what you are actually doing is reclaiming sovereignty over your psyche. When personal information is no longer available, manipulation loses P. Rescission. The narcissistic dynamic depends on intimate knowledge. Without it, control becomes clumsy and unstable. This boundary also reconnects you with yourself. When you are not constantly narrating your life to someone else, you begin listening inward again. Clarity strengthens. Confidence grows quietly. And something powerful happens. The need for validation fades. Remember this: not everyone deserves access to your inner life. Privacy is not secrecy, it is self-respect. Guard it, and you guard your freedom. The fifth boundary you must establish is the boundary of consequences, because without consequences, boundaries are nothing more than ideas. A narcissistic woman does not respond to words, promises, or emotional appeals. She responds to patterns. If disrespect, manipulation, or violation is followed by continued access to you, the message is clear: the behavior works. And what works will be repeated. Many people struggle here because they confuse consequences with punishment. They argue, warn, threaten, and explain, hoping reason will correct behavior. But narcissism does not self-correct through insight. It adapts through feedback. As Carl Jung observed, what remains unconscious is lived out as fate. When you fail to act on your boundaries, You unknowingly participate in a cycle that feels inevitable, but isn't. Setting this boundary means that when a line is crossed, something changes. Access is reduced, distance is created, energy is withdrawn, not dramatical. Lie not emotionally, but calmly and consistently. You do not announce consequences in advance, and you do not negotiate afterward. The action speaks for itself. This is what disrupts the narcissistic expectation that you will always return to baseline. This is often the moment when manipulation intensifies. Guilt, anger, charm, or victimhood may suddenly appear. This is not transformation, it is resistance. The test is whether your behavior changes or remains steady. Consistency is what teaches others how to treat you. Over time, this boundary does something profound. It restores your self-trust. You begin to believe yourself again because your actions align with your values. And when self-trust returns, tolerance for disrespect disappears naturally. Remember this: boundaries are not proven by what you say, but by what you are willing to lose. When consequences are real, your freedom becomes real too. The final boundary is the most important one, because it does not exist between you and her. It exists between you and yourself. A narcissistic dynamic only survives as long as your identity is entangled with her perception of you. Approval, rejection, admiration, and criticism become mirrors through which you unconsciously define who you are. Over time, you stop asking, "What do I think?" and start asking, "How will this be received?" That is the quiet erosion of selfhood. This boundary is about reclaiming authorship of your identity. It means refusing to let her moods deter. Mind your worth, her opinions shape your direction, or her reactions define your reality. As Carl Jung understood, individuation begins the moment a person separates their true self from the projections placed upon them. When you confuse projection with truth, you live someone else's story. Setting this boundary is internal, but its effects are external. You stop explaining who you are. You stop defending your character. You stop trying to be seen correctly by someone who benefits from seeing you incorrectly. Instead, you anchor yourself in your values, routines, and long-term direction. Identity becomes something you live, not something you negotiate. This is often when the narcissistic grip collapses, when you are no longer emotionally reactive, endlessly available, verbally entangled, informationally exposed, or consequence-free, and now no longer self-doubting. There is nothing left to control. The dynamic starves. What replaces it is something far more powerful: self-alignment. You feel steady even in uncertainty. You trust your perceptions. You move forward without needing permission. Remember this: the moment you stop asking who you are through her eyes, you begin becoming who you actually are. And that is the boundary no narcissist can cross.